Excellent. So welcome to this new session of the networking program, the networking channel. We are restarting today our semester until June. As you might know, the networking channel is addressing a broad set of topics, ranging from highly technical research questions to education, social issues, as well as inclusion. And today we are very pleased to shed light on Africa, regarding questions related to infrastructure, research, and education, addressing questions that, of course, are of utmost importance for Africa, but also for all of us in the community. So I'm very pleased today to welcome a great panel, which is organized with a diversity of representatives from research and higher education in Africa. So I'm very pleased that we have Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba Gueye. He's a professor with the University Cheikh Anta Diop in Senegal. We have Assane Gueye, associate teaching professor from Carnegie Mellon University-Africa in Rwanda. Josiah Chavula is a lecturer researcher in computer science networks at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. We have Farouk Kamoun, professor from Ecole Nationale des Sciences de l'Informatique, ENSI, in Tunisie. And then we have Maïssa Mbaye, is a faculty from the University Gaston Berger de Saint-Louis in Senegal. So I'm very pleased that we can today really shed light on the important questions that are facing the community in Africa. And without any delay, I will hand over to the first speaker, Josiah Chavula. But before we hand over to Josiah, I remind you that the program is being recorded and that you will be able to enjoy it on our YouTube channel. As well as, please, it's really important that this program is interactive, so you can use the Q&A in Zoom to ask questions directly, and the panelists will be able to handle them either directly through the Q&A or live, because we'll certainly have a few minutes to discuss about those questions. So thanks to you all for joining. We believe this is very important that we can address also those type of questions. And without delay, I will hand over to Josiah. Josiah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, Serge, and for the introduction. I'm really happy to be amongst this esteemed group of people doing research in various fields of networking. Just to confirm, how many minutes do you allow me to speak?
About 10 minutes will be maximum because we have 5 panelists, okay?
Yes, okay. So I don't want to talk forever. Maybe we can come back some points later. So as a way of introduction, as already mentioned, I'm a lecturer in computer science at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I don't know how many of you have been to South Africa so far. Of the panelists, any one of you been to South Africa? Oh, okay. Yeah, next time you come, I hope you'll be able to visit us at the University of Cape Town. Just shout out to me, and I'll be happy to take you around. So I'll just speak broadly to what really sort of interests me in this area of research, and then maybe I can talk about some of the things that I find useful from an African perspective in the networking research. Okay, so at the University of Cape Town, I lead a research group known as the Networking for Development, specifically because we want to focus on addressing networking challenges that would enable or sort of improve the socioeconomic status within the African context. So all our thinking when we think of networking, the internet, it's about in what way can we develop it in such a way that it sort of improves Africans and African continent, but also really focusing on those specific challenges that are pertinent to Africa. Because in other parts of the world, some of the challenges that we deal with now have already been solved, but the nature of our continent and the nature of our infrastructure gives us certain challenges that we have to deal with. So that's where we try and focus our research. So I do a lot of network measurements type of research or internet measurements, really trying to understand the performance of the internet in Africa, the interconnection between network providers, the different network systems in Africa, how are we interconnected, and how does that translate to performance. And then we have got another strand of research which focuses on building network infrastructure for lowly sourced communities. So, for example, if you think of townships or rural areas, particularly in South Africa here, we focused a lot on townships because these are small places, but with a high density population without resources. And we're thinking, how can we develop infrastructure in these places for internet access or technology transfers? So we think of community networks in those places. And then we also think about how to use some of the network measurement data that we collect, either from some of these small networks or from the large scale internet, how to use that to sort of design better internet infrastructure, or how can we model a network infrastructure that is better for our kind of context. Okay, so that means we have now to go into this data-driven type of engineering, like using AI, training models to be used in traffic engineering, for example. Those are some of the things that we do in our research group. So that's just to give an idea of where we are. So in South Africa, I tried to see what other universities are doing in terms of networks research. And it does appear that it is not a lot. You'd think that there's a lot of networking research, but there isn't. In many of the computer science departments, among the top universities in South Africa, they're not doing networks research. You find software engineering, you find health informatics, they do research on health information systems. Not too many of them are doing networks research as I would anticipate or as I would expect. I find in a few places they're doing next generation network, like using 5G, how to develop systems with 5G and applications on 5G. In another place, I find something to do with cloud, a little bit of cloud. In another place, there's a little bit of network security and intrusion, I think at roads. But it's not a lot of core networking research. So maybe that's something that we should be aware of. I would want to hear from my colleagues from other African universities how much networks research is happening there or what they've observed from other places. Yeah, so maybe just I can drill a little bit more about what I think are some of the important issues that we need to deal with when we look at African internet or the networking in Africa, maybe from a measurement point of view, as I've said. I'm glad to see Assane here. Assane, we've collaborated in a few other works to do with measurements, so we can always comment on each other's work here. But from network measurements point of view, what I think is useful for Africa is really being able to not just collect these data sets, but getting a really deep insight into the interconnection of the African internet, and then going on further to analyze what those different interconnection settings mean in terms of performance for the end users. So, for example, the interconnection in South Africa is quite different from what you'd observe in say, Senegal or in Mali or in Tunisia or in Malawi, for example. It all depends on some historical issues, how many network operators are there, how many transit providers are there, international hosting companies, and all of that. So it ends up being quite different. And that also means that the user's experience when using internet resources in those countries is quite different. So I believe really understanding these interconnection issues and looking at how those things impact the users is quite a useful thing. But from a research point of view, this also means that we need to develop the right tools that would allow us to collect these data sets at a large scale. So if you've done, if you're into network measurements, for example, you know of things like RIPE Atlas, which is this platform that allows people to run measurements from different locations. We have a huge deployment of RIPE Atlas probes in Europe in Asia, in North America, very limited deployment in Africa, which means anyone wanting to do measurements in Africa, they have a much more difficult job to do to get to that point. Either they develop the tools themselves and then deal with the difficulty of deploying and having users that will accept to deploy those things. So it's a lot more difficult. And I wish that as researchers, maybe we could begin to talk and work together on how to develop and deploy these tools that we'll need to collect the data sets that will allow us to understand how the internet infrastructure is structured now in Africa, how it's evolving, and how we can use that data set for understanding our continent better. And then maybe from that, we would also need to, of course, as part of the research, beginning to understand better what are the useful metrics for the African internet. Sometimes we look at metrics because these are the popular metrics. We look at latency, we look at throughput, and all of these things that are popular in other places. But maybe there's something else here that we should be focused on, the issues of the cost of the data, retransmissions. You're retransmitting data, you're using up your mobile data. Most of our users are using data on the mobile devices. Retransmission rates, retransmission of the data, drop rates, and so on. So those are things that we need to, I think, focus a lot more on and begin to question how we do the networks research, but also talking to users, talking to network operators to really understand what are the key metrics that we need to be looking at when we look at networks research in Africa, and not just doing what is happening in Europe and in North America, as it were. When it's 10 minutes, please just stop me. I'll stop right there. And then we can come back to this. And of course, with that, we also, it's important to look at the historical trends or the time series trends of whatever data sets we collect, because much as we're saying the networks are not as good as they are in other places, the truth is that things are improving in many places. Maybe not at the same rate in all places, but there are significant improvements in terms of our internet infrastructure, our network performance, and so on. And looking at those trends would help us to understand, oh, at what point have we seen these jumps in performance? What has happened in those different parts of Africa? And how can we copy that and replicate it in other places? So historical trends is something that I find useful. But again, all of that has to come to the same place of how do we collect this data set? How do we put it in a place that can be shared, can be analyzed by all the researchers that are interested in this type of work? And then that speaks also to one of the research interests that I have, that I'm working with some of the honors students and maybe master students, is how to develop these measurement platforms in a more efficient, or that the measurement tools should be a little bit more efficient. Because as we know, when we run measurements on a network, we are using resources in that network. And if you're running measurements in a low resource network, like a community network, then you want to be as efficient as possible when you're running your measurements, so that you don't obviously impact negatively the network, but also you want to have a complete data set that really is reflective of the performance. So how to really be efficient in running network measurements is quite a useful thing. And then something that I also find that we should obviously be focused on, and maybe others are already focused on, is again using that data to design networks. It's not enough to just measure and know what it is, what we have, but maybe a step further to model new networks, new protocols even. How can we use all this data set to question the performance of different protocols? Maybe I'll talk about this again a little bit later, but some of the work that we are interested in, and we've done a little bit of it, is to try and measure the performance of these new protocols, or these next generation protocols, how they perform in Africa when you compare them in a more resource continent or more developed infrastructure environment. So like DNS or DNS over HTTPS or DNS over TLS, which is supposed to secure how DNS resolution happens. But if you run measurements in our networks in Africa, for example, where the latencies are high and maybe some of the networks are not very reliable, you'll experience quite a reduced performance compared to some other places where that protocol doesn't have a negative impact on performance, or maybe even improves the performance. So really questioning these protocols and putting in our own contribution to the design of those protocols based on our experience of our African internet and our data-based or our evidence-based analysis of those protocols is quite useful. But I stop here for now because I believe I'll use 10 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Joshua. Very informative presentation, and of course, certainly many topics and questions to be discussed. Let's hand over now to Bamba Gueye.
Okay. Thank you, Serge. Do you see my slide?
Yeah, very well. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much, Serge. It's a nice pleasure to meet you again. Serge was my advisor when I have got my PhD in Paris. And what Josiah said before, according to measurement and so on, I have some issue when I came to Senegal, how to have vantage points in Senegal due to the Louis content and so on. So I will try to show the education strategy that we have in Senegal. I think that Josiah focus more on research, and you can see that based in Senegal or in South Africa, we have not the same trend according to networking education. So we talk about connectivity in Senegal and a little bit some challenge that we should face in order to improve our education. And since 2015, we have some new policies according to Senegal government would like to promote science, technology, and engineering in primary and secondary schools. And based on this, we increase the number of students in higher college and so on. And in 2015 and so on, we have a huge amount of new bachelor that came to university. And we do not have enough infrastructure how to handle these new students that we have. And following the digital strategy of Senegal, they would like to integrate digital technology and so on. And based on the ICT development of ITU, Senegal was ranked at 142 do in 2017. And based on this index got a couple of indicators that measure the ICT readiness, that means infrastructure access, and ICT use, what mean intensity, or ICT capabilities that measure also the skill. And if you look at the trend in Senegal, we have more cellular network customers that use internet. And most of cellular network are we don't have like in Europe or North America a kind of contract with a provider. And it's the reason why if you see this picture, you can see that the number of additional line or fiber optic is less than 2%. At least 98% of internet links is based on mobile internet. Based on the penetration rate also, you can see that we have 48% of penetration rate. We have a little shift due to the COVID and so on. But internet links are based mostly on internet mobile. And if you see also the number of bachelor degrees, what it is important to measure the number of bachelor degrees, you will see after that the Senegalese government is trying to push the students in distance learning. In distance learning, why? Because you have not enough infrastructure to handle the amount of students. And if you see also the education in Senegal, if you see the number of bachelor, at least 15% are only dedicated in science and technology field. And we have most of these students that are in the science and technology field will go to Europe or North America. And we have just a little bit that stays in Senegal. So we have not enough students in science and technology field to do, for instance, researches and so on. And you can see that the number of bachelor is increased since 2015. The number is increasing a lot. And according to the geographic distribution of Senegal, we have 7 public universities that are face-to-face, and 1 virtual university, called University Senegalese Virtual Senegal. And we have also 2 political schools. And if you see the map, you can see that the huge amount of infrastructure are in the west coast of Senegal. We have also the Virtual University of Senegal that have some, what they mean by, it's an open space, a digital open space that can that enable a student to do some academic stuff or to do some exam and so on. But if you can see, we have a lot of students that are in the virtual space. And if you see the growth of students according to the virtual Senegal University, in 2023, we have 60,000 of students, whereas in 2014, we have just 3,000. You can see the exponential growth that we have in the virtual university. What the number is increased, the main reason is that the physical university do not have enough infrastructure to involve this new bachelor. And we can push the huge amount of students in the virtual Senegalese university. So what is the main issue that we need to overcome? We need to overcome the high cost of internet connectivity, the presence of wide spot areas, the low broadband capacity, and the lack of physical infrastructure. Wide spot area means that if you can see the map in Senegal, in the east coast, we do not have high density of population. So the provider do not need to invest in base station and so on. So we have a lot of areas that are not covered by cellular network. So according to research networking, what we do according to the unconnected areas that we have in Senegal is to provide some communication systems based on long range radio like LoRa or wide space in order to interconnect wide spot areas with the fixed network of Senegalese national communication like IDA, allow to cover a set of areas that are not covered by internet by using TV wide space. The main outcome is to bring network convergence to connect the unconnected rural area. Also, we need also to try to support the fishermen that effort to adapt to climate change. Due to the contract, the agreement that Senegal has signed with the European Commission, they have a lot of boats that come to Senegal. So the fish are going far away from the coast. So we have a lot of damage with fishermen, and how to bring some network connectivity to allow communication between the because in Senegal, using satellite is very expensive for fishermen that are doing artisanal fishing. It's the reason why we try to figure out how to put some low technical architecture. Also, we're trying to deal with land degradation, atmospheric pollution, food and nutrition security. And the research that we have here is to deploy some architecture to collect and to transmit the data. And the most architecture that we use here is to stop or edge or neck in order to bring the computation near the off, so we can try to reduce the latency and to avoid also to go to the cloud. On the other end, also we try also to put some intelligent farming system, because in Senegal we have pastoral mobility that are in Senegal, in Mauritania, in Mali, and so on, and they have also some drawbacks during the mobility of header between different countries and security and cattle rustling and so on. And by providing some connectivity or some with LoRa, with free band, yes, and we can try to enhance the pastoral mobility. And also we try also to use this data to put decision making by doing data vision. And the main challenge that we have in Senegal is how to deal with increased access demand in university, and also how to increase and diversify the funding sources. Quite often, we have some grants from European Union or IRCDC or ERD and so on. How also to develop Senegalese research and innovation based on a national scientific agenda. Because quite often, the proposal that we receive from outside consider Africa as a test bed. So the fundamental research is done outside, and we use just our countries and so on as test bed, and we have not technology transfer between the north and the south. So we need to improve also south-to-south cooperation in order to gather our network infrastructure, our environmental test bed and so on. When I done my PhD, I have, for instance, Planet Lab or One Lab, how to have this kind of network simulation in Africa. I think we can improve our research and improve also what Josiah said before, to have some kind of internet measurement to know how the traffic is in Africa. So thank you very much, Serge. I hope that I have not exposed the time.
No, it's perfect, Bamba. Just for your information, it seems that your connectivity is not so good. So we were able to capture the message, but apparently maybe you have to switch off your video in case you would like to answer to questions, but everything is fine so far. Thank you so much. It's very informative to understand what kind of problems your community is facing, from massive demand in education, which we know is the biggest challenge in Africa, to also a brain drain and addressing very important problems as the fisherman one that you mentioned, which of course is certainly not identified from our side. So let's see what is happening in Tunisia. Farouk has a quite similar presentation with respect to topics, but certainly the perspective is different in Tunisia. Farouk, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Serge. Let me get the okay, can you see it? It's fine?
You have to put it in, yeah, that's perfect now. Excellent.
Okay, thank you. So, hello, everybody. So I'm going to try to focus on Tunisia. Actually, I haven't talked to Bamba in any way on how to handle this talk. It seems like we almost follow the same approach. So, as far as so what I will be talking about is strategies, connectivity, higher education, focus only on higher education, research and innovation, and then some concluding remarks. Well, Tunisia, maybe some people don't know exactly where it is. So it's the northeast tip of Africa. It's symmetric to South Africa. So we can, probably it's the longest distance from that tip to South Africa. Doesn't mean that we should not see each other, as Joshua was mentioning. So let's, in Tunisia, informatics has been in the area and in the strategy of government since 1974. And we, since then, have been establishing 5-year strategic plans. So we move every 5 years with a plan in IT. And we have now a Ministry of Communication Technologies in charge of IT and telecom, used to be telecom. But higher education and research is within the Ministry of Higher Education. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I've been back from the States where I took my PhD in computer science in the ARPANET group. So I was in Tunisia since 1976. So I've been living all the growth and development and also of the IT scene in Tunisia. So in terms of connectivity, we have now more than 66% in 2019 people connected, users connected to the internet. It's always a little bit difficult to find data in up-to-date data in Tunisia, and also, if I may say so in general in Africa too. Of course, it's mostly in terms of telephony, it's with the mobile phone, of course, there's a very, very big growth, so more than 130%. But this is also, there is sort of a slowdown in the fixed telecommunication. So it's now Tunisia is doing more efforts in trying to provide fiber optics and more ADSL also. In terms of higher education, as you see, Tunisia now, we may say in Senegal, most of the universities are located on the west, on the east side, not on the west. This side on the Mediterranean Sea. There's a major concentration in Tunis, which is the capital, and Sousse Monastir, which are very close to each other, and Sfax. But there are more and more institutions that are located in public or private universities. As a matter of fact, there are in the year 2000, sorry for the year 2021-22, there are around 110 institutions, that mean schools, institutes, faculty of sciences, and there are 13 public universities. There are about 300,000 students in that year. 200 out of the 310 institutions, we have 229 public sector institutions with 256,000 students and 76 private sector. The private sector is growing quite fast. Of course, in Tunisia, for a long period of time, we didn't have the possibility to launch private schools or universities, actually private institutions, because it's still not allowed to have fully fledged university, a private university. But you see that more than, let's say, almost a quarter of all students are now in the private sector. And if we look at this graph here, we see that in the field of ICT, there are a large number of students. Actually, there are more than 50% of total number of students in the public sector that are within, that chose the ICT as a field of study. And in the private sector, more than about 30% of the students in the private sector are in ICT. So there's really, in the private sector, there's quite focus on ICT because there is a huge big demand, actually. And also a lot of students want to move to, want to study ICT. Globally, there are about 17% of total Tunisian students who follow the either a bachelor or master's or an engineering degree in ICT. This is a quite important number. Well, here I probably will not go through all the details, but lately the Ministry of Higher Education has tried to structure the domains of study in the field of computer science, ICT in general, in order to give some kind of authorization for schools to open or renew their bachelor degree, or to open or renew their master's degree. The engineering degree has different procedure, but what you see here is maybe the three, like computer science, computer engineering, computer and business computing. These are in the bachelor degree and the master's degree. In terms of the telecommunication, it's a special, it still have some schools and degrees in telecom. So I added this here. In terms of engineering, it's similar to a master's degree. So you can see software engineering, data science, cloud computing. Yeah, these are very important and they are trendy right away. Software engineering, let's say, in Tunisia is probably the field that is most in demand because there are a lot of software development enterprises in Tunisia working for the international market, and some companies like they also set up offices in Tunisia and development centers in Tunisia. That's why you see also why so many students are following the ICT domain. As far as networking, we can see it in the area called computer engineering. So we have, of course, embedded systems, IoT, network experts, security. So these are areas where there's some diplomas in networks. Of course, telecom is dedicated to telecom system, but nowadays the School of Telecoms, we have a couple of schools of telecom. They also do a lot of software. In terms of research, I try to have also some statistics to show the importance of research in ICT as compared to research in Tunisia. In Tunisia, research is carried out in universities or dedicated centers within research laboratories. So research lab is 30 to 120 researchers, including faculty members, PhD students. Research units is almost half of the research lab. So if we look at the data from 2017, 2018, there are a total of 329 labs. There are 26 in ICT, and there are 301 research units and 7 in ICT. In terms of faculty, professors, from assistant to associate, the full professor, 11,000 and around 1,000 in ICT. PhDs delivered 169 ICT. Index publications in journals, 289. Out of the research labs, there are 12 of them, out of the 26 in ICT, 12 of research labs, they have teams working on networks. So it's a fairly important number. Actually, research in networking started in 1978, actually, since we got the first graduates when I came back in Tunisia. Otherwise, in terms of research topics, there are multiple research, IoT protocols and applications. Some research is really towards the protocols, performance evaluation, or security. Some others in this area are related to applications like e-health, smart grid, smart agriculture, water loss detection. These are promising applications because they are probably easier to experiment in Tunisia or to have some pilot projects. Vehicular networks, intelligent transport systems, also some teams working on that. Some students of mine are working on critical real-time driving protocols. Some people working on data dissemination protocols, access point deployment, more adaptive security, energy consumption also, because energy is now an issue. The problem that we face in how to model energy consumption. And actually one of the schemes that we developed has been introduced in one of the simulation tools. Unmanned aerial vehicles, blockchain and applications. Actually, unmanned aerial vehicles and application to border surveillance. You know, Tunisia has been hit a few years ago with problems with terrorism and Islamist terrorists. So border surveillance using any kind of tools it's a major issue. Now, there are some projects that are trying to work on that. Blockchain and applications, I put blockchain within the community of, because they're based on network work and they're based on distributed algorithms and consensus. So there's some trend now that's an interest in blockchains and their applications. Blockchains are used for IoT, for fog computing, access control, ID management. Also, some people are trying to define and scalable lightweight blockchains for IoT. In terms of, so in research with cybersecurity, also a few teams working on that. Next generation network and then ICN network protocols and data localization. Telecom networks, you know, this is the most of the Subcom has a few labs. Subcom is really the dedicated school for telecom. It's a little bit of the image of what is done in France, like Telecom Paris or other telecom. So they deal with all issues with the transmission, 5G, antennas, indoor communication, location, and D2D communication, and so forth. There are also some people working on cloud computing. So it's probably not quite exhaustive, but I try to gather information here and there. And it's really sometimes very difficult to find reports, published reports from the different labs that talk about the research, and also the websites are not up to date. Unfortunately, I think this is not such a, it's not very specific to Tunisia. I wanted to add the innovation because it's the last few years, since 2017, there is a new law called Startup Act. It's here to incentivize the creation of startups. So they give some various fiscal privileges and also some funding schemes, special funding schemes. So there's really a huge interest in Tunisia for that. And there is a growing innovation ecosystem with co-working spaces, accelerators, incubators, funding funds. Sorry for some French words that slipped over here. So in January 2023, remember this law has been voted in 2017 or so. There are more than 1,239 startups, 84 of which are in ICT, which is probably the community is quite dynamic. The ICT, the startups, unfortunately, a few are in, very few in networking, but I would say in blockchain, yes, with fintech. So there's AI, marketplaces, fintech, and some are using blockchain, smart agriculture, security. And let me say that there's some good event happened lately in Tunisia. The first huge sale of a startup. It's been bought for 409 million euros. It's a Tunisian startup in AI called University. So Tunisians are very proud of that. So let me, after this sort of, give you a panorama of what's going on. Let's say synthetic panorama of what's going on in the computing scene, in the ICT scene in Tunisia. Let me give some these concluding remarks. I would say that ICT is really a thriving sector in Tunisia, with a 4.3% contribution to GDP, which is fairly important, and 3.2% to employment. So this, and that's really very extremely important, and it's growing. These statistics data in 2019, but as Mbaye mentioned and Serge, there is a major brain drain, and it's a big challenge for us. But so Europe is sort of attracting a lot of our graduates, maybe after 2 or 3 years of work, of experience, and sometimes it's really, even during their end of studies project, they go there and stay in Europe, and maybe, of course, as we have strong ties with France, maybe in France. ICT attracts a very significant number of students, but students are less inclined to embrace networking specialties. It seems that networking is a little bit out of fashion. It seems like it. The students don't want to go into infrastructure, and as I said, they want the software engineering, and now they all want to go into AI. But we still have a good, strong population in the network area. As far as research is concerned, so it's well established. As I said, it started as early as 1979. However, it's dispersed with no real focus on particular areas and large projects. There is no, as Bamba said, there is no real agenda of big project and being implemented in Tunisia. There have been a lot of talks, but not a real agenda with money, of course, with financing. There are a lot of lack of experimental environments. So many of the studies are done with simulation, performance evaluation with simulation. Interaction with industry is weak, of course, it's a real lack of industry. However, it's improving lately around IoT and blockchain. Attract less PhD students. This is a problem too. They have much better salaries in going to enterprises. International cooperation is mainly with Europe and in particular France. However, cooperation is practically insignificant with African countries. And that's really a shame. I hope this panel will trigger some thoughts about cooperation in Africa. Thank you. Serge, I'm done.
Thank you so much, Farouk, for this Tunisian perspective. And I will, without any transition, hand over directly to Maïssa, who is going to give a different focus on research in Senegal.
Okay, so may I share my screen, please?
Yeah, Farouk, you have to quit your presentation.
I did.
Okay.
You can go ahead and share your screen. Right. Did I quit or not?
Not really.
Can you see the screen?
Oui. Well, don't you try? Can you share the screen?
Yes, I'm sharing. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Which one are you seeing?
We see the
Zoom.
The Zoom window.
Is it yours
Okay.
or for Farouk?
Maybe Farouk, because
we actually it's a slide
Okay.
of your. I mean, it's just your browser. So
Okay.
we're seeing Zoom because in your browser. Yeah.
I think we have the screen of Farouk right now.
Yeah, that's true. Farouk, you have to
Oh, yes, yes.
stop
Okay,
sharing.
okay,
Stop
okay,
sharing,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, now
Oh,
that's
sorry. I did. I did stop. I stopped sharing. Sorry for that.
okay.
Can you
That's
see my screen now?
yeah, that's
Is
perfect
it
now.
fine for you now?
Maïssa.
I stopped sharing.
That's good.
Okay. So thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Very well so far.
Okay. I'm going to make a presentation with a different perspective of the one that I've been done. I will try. So this is my agenda. I'm going to talk about the research topics in networking as I have seen during these last 15, 17 years in Senegal and all around the African countries where I made some collaboration. And after that, I will push my analysis or my presentation to environmental opportunities of research in Africa. So first of all, just the topics in networking. In fact, during the year from 2005 to 2000 and I would say 12, most of the research network in networking in Africa and mainly in Senegal are simulation oriented. They are done in the areas where the simulation is possible. So you can have routing and routing algorithm and protocol, mainly wireless networks. You have access networks, you have quality of service, you have wireless sensor network, and you also have physical link layer and network security. And in general, you have telecommunication and mobile networks. Those are the main topics that have been addressed by African researchers because it was quite easy to make some research using simulation, and NS2 was very popular at this time. And from that, with the development of wireless sensor network and IoT, they moved to some testbed oriented topics. Mainly IoT is covering all the other topics. And people are trying to do some prototyping and do some network or LP1 deployment. And embedded system is getting more and more attention of researchers, and people are doing the convergence between AI and networking. And the cybersecurity, which can be seen now quite a little bit different from network security, is also gaining some attention of researchers. So most of people are a little bit orienting themselves to these topics. And the fact is that everybody is trying to apply their network research to the development sectors, mainly agriculture, environment, transport, education, etc. And that is a new thing that African researchers in networking are trying to solve development problems that they have locally. And with the development of cloud computing, also in parallel, we are having some cloud-oriented topics. I mean, cloud and software-defined networks, edge and fog computing, and we have blockchain that Farouk said. We have cybersecurity, we have artificial intelligence for network management, and we have remote sensing using AAU with machine learning, which can be affiliated to IoT. And we also have quite new topic for African researcher in Africa, because some African do this kind of research, but out of Africa. We have high performance computing that is quite new. I will talk about this one that start at first in South Africa and after that in North of Africa, and which is spreading all around Africa. And something happened in 2014. The World Bank has launched the ACE Impact project. The ACE Impact project is support by the World Bank and AAU, African University, African Association University. And it's about $400 million for 45 African Center of Excellences that are hosted by universities. And you have 11 countries that are part of the project. And all of them, they receive money to develop some areas like agriculture, STEM, health, environment, and applied science and education. So I'm the head of one of these ACs that is hosted by UGB in Senegal, called ACE Mythic. And the ACE Mythic has covers three main domains. We have applied mathematics, we have computer science, and we have applied physics. Also, the ACE Impact was an opportunity to make some network of African Center of Excellence, since most of us they know that collaboration between all the topics are necessary to tackle the development areas like health, environment, or some things. And we have 4 established networks. We have one health, around health. We have one in durable mines, and we have science and technology and digital technology, and we have water network. And all these centers also helped to have some high performance computation resources. So I'm going to show you some example of high performance that are being mounted all around Africa, but in some countries. The first one is one in Senegal that have been set in 2014, if I'm right. And we have around 537 teraflops. And it is not fully used, but we hope that it will be some power resources that can be used. So Senegal can have some interest on having some research on high performance computing. In Côte d'Ivoire also you have a lower one, but we have one there. And in Nigeria also we have an HPC. Also in Benin, we have one in Benin. And all these infrastructure, we are working to federate them to be able to make some high performance computing things. But this federation is not possible without connectivity. And the connectivity is a real issue in Africa. So let me show you the situation in Senegal. In Senegal, in blue here, you have all the optic fiber that have been deployed in Senegal. And about 45% of villages in Senegal are located more than 10 kilometers to the fiber. And most of the time, the telco, they are not willing to invest to connect the villages where we need some network to do some IoT or something like these applications. In Africa level, you have some regional research network that are developing. You have Africa, the project is called Africa Connect. We have Africa Connect 1, Africa Connect 2, and we are on Africa Connect 3. And you have regionally, you have ASREN in North Africa. You have the WACREN in West and Center of Africa. You have in green, and you have Ubuntu Alliance in East and Austral Africa, where you have some links that are deployed to connect all these high education institution to Giant in Europe and Clara in South Africa, South America, and also Internet 2 in America. You have also AMED in northeast of Africa. And the work rent is being the one in which the Senegal involves. And we have around 4 national brand, and they receive some money from European Union to make more connection. The common services that we have in this kind of and work rent, we have high-speed connectivity, and we have network performance monitoring, identity, access management like EduRoam. So by work rent, we can have access to EduRoam. We have EduVPN, we have video conference services, and we have security services and network operations center services. So in summary, so we are now developing some research around testbed oriented research and cloud oriented research mainly, that need high performance, that is developing, and that need connectivity. And we have some regional and national education network that are being developed in Africa through some project like ACE Impact. So I'm going to stop here since the time is running. So thank you. If you have any questions about it.
Thank you, Maïssa. It's nice to see that there is some structuring and coordination effort in order to provide those instruments to the African community. I know that we are a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to hand over straight to Assane so that we can have a different perspective. Thank you, Assane.
Thank you, Serge. It is a pleasure to be here with his colleagues. We have been working with Josiah, Bamba, Maïssa, and of course Farouk. We haven't worked together, but certainly it's gonna come. I am speaking last, and I know the time is over, and I have myself a meeting actually that was supposed to start 3 minutes ago, so I will go fast. So I won't be repeating what the colleagues have said. I will add to what I have heard. The first thing, maybe just to emphasize on the network education. It looks like that networking is becoming less exotic for the students. And this is not only an African issue. I think that even in other countries, we see that trend. And of course, students are going where the money is. And unfortunately, most of the money is going to other subjects. So maybe we need to rethink how we teach network in our universities. The second one is really the research aspect. And I would like to put the perspective where I'm coming from into the whole digital transformation of the continent. And of course, I'm coming from Carnegie Mellon University, which is a US institution, but I'm based in Kigali, where we have our campus, Africa campus, and I lead a lab that is focusing on what we call digital public goods. So these are technologies that are supposed to help the digital transformation of the continent. And what happened is that when you think of digital public good, when you think of technology to enable the digital transformation of the continent, you see that infrastructure is fundamental. If you don't have this infrastructure that underlines those technology, basically you won't be getting the most out of it. So as my colleagues have shown, there are challenges that we believe, as Josiah mentioned, we work together on some aspect. There are challenges that are African challenges when it comes to communication, for example, and connectivity. For example, intermittence. So if we think of rural areas where, as Maïssa has shown in the map of Senegal, we don't have connectivity in rural areas. But what happened is that even if we had connectivity, links will go down once in a time, and when it goes down, it takes time for the maintenance people to reach where the links are. So it will take, the link will be down for some time. So when we think of connectivity in Africa, I believe that we should be thinking networks that are tolerant of intermittent. So intermittent tolerant network is something that we should be looking at when we think of connectivity in the continent. Low cost, of course, so if it costs too much, and the reason why the telcos are not going to rural areas is clear. It's because there is no money there. There is no return in investment. When you deploy a base station in a rural area and you have a low density of people using it, you're not going to get the money. So we can talk about universal coverage, but the telcos will not go there unless we are capable of coming up with technology that are cheap to deploy. So that's another issue that I think that as African, when we think of research and connectivity in the continent, we need to be thinking that way. Low maintenance is important. Low maintenance also, since maintaining the networks will take time. Other things that we have been looking at in our lab is we are Africa thinking. So when it comes to networks, so when Maïssa showed the different networks in the continent, you see that the connectivity between them is missing. So and all the effort of the African Union is talking about Africa. So every country is doing their effort, but we believe that any single country won't be able to solve the problem itself. So we need to be going as a continent, as regions together. And for that, we need to be thinking how we are connected globally. And that brings many questions, actually, where Josiah and myself, we have done, for example, study where we see when we communicate between Africa and where it goes. And everybody knows that it goes around the world before coming, that this boomerang route and things. So we need to be solving those problems. And I would like to bring the policy aspect also of networking, because today in the continent, there are many, many efforts on data protection and talks about the locality of data. So is the data hosted in the continent, in the countries, and we see that most of the data that we are using, we need to reach out outside the continent to basically access them. So when the policy people are talking about what to do in network, I think that it is important that the technology people sit on the table and be part of the discussion. So as we are thinking, what to do when it comes to policy orientation, the economics of networks, I think that we should be working more with our colleagues who are in those areas doing policy and so on. So other things that I think are important, we have been talking, people have touched upon the cloud, and many things are moving in the cloud, and this is related to the data locality item that I mentioned. So when we are talking about Africa, I think that it is important also that we give some computing aspect to people or infrastructure in the rural areas, and that calls to edge computing. I think that as African, as researchers in the continent, when we try to solve our problems, edge is presenting a good opportunity, because we lack the connectivity to the cloud. We don't have it, but we still need, as Maïssa was saying, we have our IoT devices that we are deploying in the rural areas. So how do you make use of the data that is being generated if you are not connected to the cloud? So edge computing, and edge computing that is mindful to the local environment is something that we should be looking at close. And that brings also another aspect, which is security. As we are moving to this digital world, as we are transforming digitally the continent, we should be able to protect the network infrastructure. If we don't, the dream will probably become a nightmare. So it is something that I think also that we should be adding into the mix when we talk about networking connectivity in the continent. Other things that I think are important, for example, how independent are we in the continent when it comes to network infrastructure? How dependent are we to third-party providers that are not in the continent? With what's happening in the world, the geopolitics today, with the war in Ukraine, you see that sometimes, being too dependent on what's happening, on outside providers can be very harmful. So how are we dependent to third-party providers is something that we should be looking at and try to solve our problem. Data. So are we generating our data? Are we hosting our data? Those are issues that I believe are important. And I think that I just wanted to add a little bit to what my colleagues have said. So since time is up and I have a meeting that was supposed to start 12 minutes ago, Serge, I will stop here. I won't be able to take questions, but I'm sure people who are here are capable of doing so.
Thank you so much, Assane, and no frustration. I think actually I could not have provided a better summary than what you did. And again, the audience will be able to reach out to you or to any of the panelists if need be. I saw that there was a question that has been answered by Bamba. And again, because of time constraints, I will have to close now. But again, I would like to thank you all because it's a unique opportunity for us to open the mic and the program to you. And we'll be very pleased to give you the floor again for other topics that you would like to address. So thanks a lot to all panelists. The program is recorded, and certainly there will be questions that will be raised by the audience, and please feel free to address them whenever they come. As we usually do, I'll close here with the announcement of the next program. This is in 2 weeks. It's going to echo a little bit to some of the questions that actually you have raised with respect to the attractiveness of networking research. So this will be a roundtable conversation with the future of our field. So student and early career networking. We invite you to follow this very interesting program. This is in 2 weeks, and we are looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks within the networking program. Thanks to you all. It was a pleasure, and looking forward to other opportunities. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.